and welcome back to Art with Anna. Today we are going to be learning about the artist named David Hockney. If you are from London, then you definitely know who he is. If you're from the US, you still probably know who he is. He is an English painter who started drawing as a teenager and just noticed that he was pretty good at drawing. People liked what he was doing. He went to London for the first time when he was 18 and moved there on a full ride scholarship, I believe to the Royal School of Arts in London. So from there, he kind of became a famous painter. Now, he is part of the pop art movement. So think about another person who could possibly be in the pop art movement. Who's one other artist who's in the pop art movement? If you guessed Andy Warhol, you are correct. So Andy Warhol is another pop artist, and the philosophy of pop artists was basically that they wanted to use bright colors and different subjects for their art. They felt like when they were in museums that the art was getting kind of boring, so they wanted to do the opposite, make something kind of fun and interactive. So a big kind of telltale sign is really bright colors. That's kind of how you know you're looking at pop art. Kind of bold shapes too. So David Hockney is no exception. He liked really, really bright colors. One of his most famous pieces is what we'll be looking at today. And I picked him this week because it has been 90 degrees the whole last week, and it's supposed to be at least in the high 80s for the next week. It's been really hot. It's the middle of July. And had me thinking a lot about swimming pools. So we are going to look at this picture of the bigger splash. So this is kind of what we'll be focusing on today. We'll be mixing this paint or this piece of art with another of his pieces of art and making one cohesive piece of art. So let's talk about the supplies we'll need and we will get started. Green, yellow, orange, red, light blue, and dark blue. You also need dark blue paint, white paint, black marker, a paintbrush, can be sponge or regular, glue, a palette, a cup for water, a pair of scissors. Ideally, we'll be ripping a lot of our paper today, but if this noise and the action of ripping upset you or overstimulate you, please use scissors. Okay, so the second piece of artwork that we'll be looking at is called Paper Pool 14. And it is right here. So it's called paper pool because it's actually, instead of a painting, it is a bunch of paper pulp. So it's like little pieces of wet paper that were pressed together to make this piece of artwork. It's actually not painting at all. So we're going to be using our paper, cutting out some pieces, ripping some pieces to make a similar effect. I think one of the most fun things about the bigger splash painting is the splash. Something very cool about that painting is that we don't see who dove in. We don't see who dove in, and that kind of alludes that it could be anyone. Maybe it could even be us diving into the pool. So I do want to add a splash to this paper pool number 14. So that's how we'll be combining the two artworks. I did want to make note too, though, that these are swimming pools and they seem to be in kind of a tropical place. Although David Hockney is from England, he did move to California for a long time, and that he still has 2 homes there. So he is still alive. He is in his 80s. And he kind of was at the height of his career in the 1960s. So we see kind of a mid-century modern home there, which is one of my favorite eras of design. And that's why it's so tropical. You might be thinking, this doesn't really look like England. It's not, it's California. So let's get started and I'll talk a little bit more about the art pieces that we're working on as we are working. All right, so let's take out our blue piece of paper, our dark blue piece of paper. This is gonna be our background. And the next thing we're gonna do is take our green paper and we want to cover about 1/4 of our paper in our green paper. So let's make about 1/4. I'm going to cut this off and put it on the top of our blue paper. What we're doing with this is we are making the lawn. So we're going to take this and we're going to glue it right on the top. All right, so we have kind of our lawn. We have some dark blue down here, which is going to be our pool. The next thing that you can see in this painting is there is kind of like a walkway, a sidewalk. So we're going to use our yellow to represent that. Take out my yellow sheet of paper. So I'm going to cut out 3 strips out of this paper. And I'm going to make my own pathway on the lawn. You can make your pathway whatever shape that you want. You're designing your own landscape here. So I'm going to do one like this. David Hockney has his right on the edge of the pool and the grass, so I'll put one there. He has one kind of going back into the distance. So I'm going to put one like that. And then connecting it all the way off. So now you can see my little pathway, and I am going to also glue these down. All right, now I think it's time to work on the pool. So we have our pool here, and we have our light blue paper. So we're gonna take our light blue paper, and I want us to rip it, tear it up into small pieces. So this should take some time. Take some time really making small pieces that we will glue down onto our paper to kind of show the light flickering off the water and any little kind of waves inside the pool. So let's start doing that. Again, if tearing paper bothers you, feel free to cut out just little random pieces on here. You can just cut off little pieces too, so that you're not bothered by the ripping. So let's get doing that, and I will talk to you a little more about David Hockney. All right, so like we talked about, David Hockney is in his 80s right now, but he is still making artwork. And I think something that's really cool about him is he is an older gentleman, but he's recently started painting on his iPad. So even though he's a little bit older, he's still really open to new art techniques. So he's been doing digital drawings on his iPad, which I think are really interesting. But he's still doing a lot of painting too. His subjects typically are landscapes. He likes land a lot, so he has a lot of landscapes between London and the United States, specifically California. But he also really loves portraits. So he did this 2-year project where he made 80-some portraits with the same color backgrounds and in the same chair. And he said he liked that they were the same background on the same chair, because then you can really see the difference between individuals. You really focus on the person. So that's one of his projects that I think he's really quite famous for, which I think is just really cool. Lately, he's been doing a lot of landscapes with trees, more focus on trees. That's some of his subjects. He's also very famous for the double portrait. So he would do portraits of two people a lot. When we think of portraits, typically we just think of one person. I usually think of when you're in museums and you're looking at portraits of noblemen or kings and queens. But he often did two people in a portrait, and when people asked him why he did two people in a portrait, he said, "It's twice as interesting," which I think is kind of funny. So those are kind of the subject matters that he focuses on quite a bit. Land and people. All right. I am coming to the end of ripping my light blue paper. I have quite a few ripped. So I'm going to bring you guys over and show you what we are going to do next. All right, so I've ripped quite a bit of blue paper over here. I have my dark blue paper. Unfortunately, this glue bleaches our construction paper, so that's going to happen a little bit. But I'm just going to put kind of glue all over. And you can, one by one, put your pieces of paper on if you want to be really particular about that. I am going to sprinkle them on. Try to get them kind of all over. Them up and make sure they're all stuck on. Alright, and the ones that fell off, I'm going to stick back on. So just like the paper pool, we have quite a bit of paper that's pressed onto other paper. Make sure it's all pretty much down. So our next step is going to be a little bit tricky, so pay attention to this. We are going to take some of that dark blue paint that we have and stick it in our palette. Dark blue paint. These foam brushes are going to be really good for this part. Again, if you just have a normal paintbrush, that's totally fine too. But we are going to dip our paintbrush in our blue paint, just at the edge, and we are going to make a straight line from the edge of the pool, kind of a little at a diagonal back. We want it to be very straight, a straight line. Now right where our line meets the pool, we're going to go down and make it squiggly. Squiggly line down from there. This is going to be the shadow of our diving board. At the very end, we're going to take paint and kind of make an L shape a little bit out of it. So that is our shadow of our diving board, which leads us to the next thing. We need to make a diving board. Alright, we are going to take our orange and our red construction paper, and we want to put them directly on top of each other. Stack them directly on top of each other, because we are going to cut out a rectangle that we want to be the same exact rectangle. And it's going to be our diving board. So I'm cutting a rectangle out. And we've cut out exactly the same rectangle. We're going to glue it so that our red rectangle is just slightly above and behind our orange one. So if they were on top of each other, we've just moved it up a little and back a little. And we're going to glue them down like that. Should look like this. And that is our diving board. So I'm also going to glue that down right there on my paper. So we have our pool, our shadow, our diving board, and our pathway. We need to somehow anchor our diving board to the ground, because right now it just looks like it's totally floating in space. So that's where our black marker is going to come in. So go ahead and grab your black marker. Or any dark color really would work. And we're going to make some feet. I'm going to take this over and down, like that. And that's just it. I just made two little lines. Depending on the angle of your diving board, you might want to put some lines down underneath if you can see the other legs from over there. But right now, my diving board I think is too much at an angle to really see. So I've got those two lines there to just show that it really is anchored to the ground a little bit. All right. The next step is to clean off our brush, and we're going to get some white paint in our palette. Make sure our paintbrush is nice and clean. Some white in our palette. And we're just going to highlight some areas, some of our light blue pieces of paper. So I'm actually going to, over here, get some excess paint off. And there's some water in there. We just want a little bit of water. And I'm just going to use the corner of my brush, so I'm not going to go straight down, just hit the corner to get little bits of white. Get this. There we go. And I'm just going to do it next to some of my blue pieces of paper. Just more highlights of the light reflecting off the water. So now our water looks a little bit like that. I'm gonna rip just a few more pieces of paper and put it over our shadow. You really don't need glue for this part. The paint's still wet because the paint will hold it right on. All right, and then again, some white highlights on it. So we're left with that. Now the part that's going to make it really more like the biggest splash is going to be the splash. So we are, with our maybe just the leftover paint that's on our paintbrush. We don't want too much paint on our paintbrush. We're going to make a kind of thin splash. So since my paintbrush was pretty wet, it's hard to see on the video, but the paint's pretty thin. The next thing I'm going to do is really squeeze out my paintbrush, try to get water out of it. So This is maybe where a regular paintbrush would come a little more handy. Really get my paintbrush in some paint and then do some really bright splash lines. So we got some that aren't so bright and some that are pretty bright. I don't think you can quite see it on the camera, but it shows a little bit of dimension. And there we have it. We have a cross between the Biggest Splash and Paper Pool number 14. So I hope you're pretty proud of what you made. Hope you're dreaming about jumping off the pool as much, or off a diving board into a pool as much as I am in the summer heat. I hope you guys are staying cool out there, and just think about looking more into David Hockney. His portraits are really cool. So we might at someday talk more about his double portraits and his, I think he made like 82 portraits that were all the same background and same chairs. So some extreme amount. So we might have to work on that another time. But he's just a really cool guy. He's still alive today, still painting, still making art. So if you get a chance to look him up, do that. And we will see you guys next week for Art with Hannah. All right, see you then.